everyone. Welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are stunned. It's finally here. Bo Horvat is no longer a Vancouver Canuck. And before we do anything else, Justin, I just want to say hi, but I also want to get your thoughts on Bo Horvat as a New York Islander.
Yeah, hi. How's it going? What a shocker of a deal. I mean, first thought is don't get me wrong. I think you and I both knew that the Islanders were going to make a move here and try to make a big splash. I mean, they're sitting outside on the bubble, and I think for me, obviously, I don't think the Islanders were really on my radar. I thought maybe they could have made a play, but I honestly didn't think they were going to make a play for Bo Horvat. I figured, with a team probably making a move for him was going to be a team that was going to bring him in long term, and I figured, okay, they've got too many of those $5 and $6 million players sitting on their roster. Their biggest need, probably, in my opinion, was in goal, or not in goal. I'm sorry, on the back end to get another top four defender in there. But turns out I was wrong. And our last show, when we looked at four teams, we did not even touch the Islanders.
No. I mean, it's an interesting deal because Beauvillier is a UFA at the end of next year. So we're sort of in some ways right back where we started for the Canucks. Beauvillier, obviously not Bo Horvat, but a solid winger, fits into their top six, and has the salary that they like. And I guess he just becomes a potential UFA player to be dealt either in the offseason this year or at the deadline next year, assuming, I guess what I'm assuming, the Canucks aren't going to be a playoff team next year. Are we there? Have we come to that conclusion already?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, the pieces, they've already come out and said that their core is basically Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, JT Miller, and that's it. And really everybody else is touchable. And the one big name I keep hearing, and I've heard, who was it? The insider today on Sportsnet.
Elliot Friedman,
yes, Friedge. Yeah, Elliot Friedman came on and said that Demko was being rumored to be moved, and I actually just saw a Sportsnet Instagram post come up and said, what team is Horvat or is Demko going to play for next? And had teams in there like L.A., Pittsburgh, and a couple others. But if they move Demko, you have to assume any piece that they bring back or whatever free agent they go after in the offseason, I can't imagine it's an upgrade at all. If anything, right, they just find a short-term Band-Aid. But, in the short term, at least next year, like you talked about, I can't imagine them being any better in net. So to me, if you lose a piece like that, and if they're willing to ship out other pieces, I even heard their GM say that they might move a core player, which could mean JT Miller or, Quinn Hughes if the price is right. So, if any one of those other guys go too, definitely forget about it. This is just a full-on dumpster fire at that point, But in my opinion, I still think they're not a playoff team next year, and they've really acquired nothing out of this trade to make me think otherwise. Now, again, looking at this trade, I think you have to look at it from an Islanders perspective and think, I think most teams assume that, first and foremost in the short term, he's a rental, but they would like to get him signed. And I think, the pieces that Vancouver got back, I think as a rental were adequate. Now, as, a long-term piece, for the Islanders, I'm sure Vancouver would have liked to have gotten more, but obviously Bo might walk in the summer, after the season's over with. And
Atu Ratti is a nice little addition. He's having a decent year down in the AHL. I've heard things about him. He was just drafted in 2021. So you're talking about a guy who's 19 years old? 20 years old right now. Just turned 20. So young kid. He was a second round pick. He certainly has room to grow, is probably going to end up being a pretty good player, at least like a top 9 player for the Canucks. So when you consider Beauvillier, who even if he ends up being somebody that you just use through the end of this year and maybe the start of next and deal him at some point because he is a UFA, then you're still probably picking up a decent draft pick or a prospect for Beauvillier because, shoot, I mean, what Stanley Cup contending team wouldn't like to add Beauvillier to their top 6, top 9 kind of mix going into the playoffs? I mean, he'd be a great addition. But yeah, Atu Ratti, who obviously is the least known commodity between the two because most people have not seen his 12 NHL games. He's a solid center who very well could end up being a second, third line center for the Canucks. And then obviously you have this 2023 first round pick that I wanted to talk to you about because the condition is interesting to me. They have it where it is the pick becomes an unprotected 2024 first round pick if this year's pick is in the top 12. Now, this is ballsy to me because this means that, okay, let's say that the Islanders, let's say just things don't pan out this year, and that pick ends up being the 12th pick. Not even like that crazy of a high pick, but the 12th pick. Then it's automatically protected, at least according to the conditions that I see here. That means that it's protected, and that means that it gets bumped to next year. And now you better be good next year and because all of a sudden your pick is unprotected, and Vancouver's getting that pick, and I'm sure that that's what they're crossing their fingers for is, hey, maybe the Islanders will be bad bad enough to where they have to protect this according to our deal, and then they're bad again, and we get a chance at the lottery with someone else's pick. Which, if that happens, I know it's a relatively big if because I think that the Islanders are obviously going for the playoffs. So even if they don't make the playoffs, they'll probably end up, in one of those 15, 14. Maybe they don't hit the top 12, but there is certainly a scenario where they pick 12th, and you could end up with a disaster here, especially if Bo Horvat does not re-sign with New York, and then you end up going, we just traded a lottery pick and Beauvillier and a second-round prospect that we've been developing for a guy who was here for 25 games.
Yeah, that's obviously a concern, right? And I do think, right, if you're the Islanders, funny enough, they're sitting at 13th in the league right now, and it's top 12 protected. So so clearly they have nowhere to go but up in order to keep this pick for this season. So, but obviously we know the talent coming into this year's draft, right? I mean, Connor Bedard at the top there, but I think this draft is so deep that obviously the Islanders knew, hey, if we manage to finish 13, 12 or whatever, they could get a really legit player in this year's draft, and versus next year where I think, so far, the draft isn't going to be as deep as it is this year. So, if they
That's a fair point.
Yeah. And if they finish 10th or 9th in the league, and that's where, Vancouver's picking at with next year's pick, they might not get as good as a player next year as they would with this year. So I think that's probably where the Islanders were going with that one. And so that way, maybe in the long term, they can't look back at this and say, oh, we really got bit in the ass on this one. Because that's the big question, right? Does Bo Horvat re-sign? And if he doesn't, makes his trade look, a little bit less desirable for the Islander fans. I will say, though, as far as, Atu Ratti and Beauvillier are concerned, Ratti to me seems like he's going to, my long-term projection for a guy like this who, should have been a first-round pick. He kind of slid a little bit, into that second round, luckily for the Islanders, and he's been their top prospect going into the season because, let's face it, the Islanders didn't have a big prospect pool. They didn't have, they weren't very deep as far as that was concerned. And so I think really if they were giving up a prospect, this was really the only one they were going to get from the Islanders. And, to me, he could wind up being who was it the other day a Jordan Staal type player. I think he's got size.
Oh boy, he becomes a Jordan Staal type player, then we're going to look back at this trade and go, you dummy.
Yeah. I mean, that's trade. Where I think his potential is as far as ceiling is concerned. And, if you're Vancouver, that's kind of what you're hoping for, too, because, you've got Elias Pettersson. Hopefully you're going to get him locked up long term. JT Miller's already locked up. So if that's your 1, 2, 3 punch, I think you're doing okay. And Beauvillier is a good Swiss Army knife to have, at least for this season and next, because like you said, if they deal him next year, if he doesn't want to re-sign, they're going to get a good return out of him because, again, he can slot up and down in your top 9 almost anywhere, and he's good defensively. He's good good enough offensively to keep up with top guys. And I think the one thing Vancouver needed to do out of this trade was to get a little faster, and Beauvillier brings a little bit more speed to the team too. So the big question mark, though, obviously for the Islanders is, does Bo Horvat re-sign now?
Right, and going into that trade, the Islanders are thinking, oh well, we're going to re-sign him.
Yeah, you have to. If you're Lou, you don't make this move unless you legitimately think you can re-sign him. And the funny part is going into this whole ordeal where we kept hearing all these rumors about Bo Horvat getting moved and how the process was going to work, really, Vancouver was clear that Jim Rutherford said that they were not going to allow teams to talk to Horvat's agent.
Right.
So, who knows? Of course, there's always those wink behind closed doors things, but who knows if Horvat's even going to re-sign there or not?
Well, they have a projected $16 million in cap space right now. So, there's that. They're going to lose, Zach Parise, whatever, as a UFA. It's really the Semyon Varlamov. So you're going to lose your goaltender, and then you're going to have to probably sign Sorokin to a big extension. Which is going to eat up some of that money. But other than that, pretty much everyone is locked up. So you're in a position to be able to re-sign him to... he's going to get something similar to what Matthew Barzal got. If Matthew Barzal's getting 9 times 8, then you got to think Bo Horvat's shooting for somewhere in that neighborhood. And maybe it ends up being 8.5, whatever. But he's not going to be going and signing for $6 million a year.
Oh, no, absolutely not. And that's the big thing, right? I know, the big concern for me is this offseason. Do they sign Bo Horvat, before the offseason, or do they address this after the playoffs to see how he does, see if they even get in, how he gels with the team, all that sort of stuff. But, for me, I looked at a few numbers when I was looking at Barzal's deal and Horvat and, what he could potentially get. Now, since the 2018-19 season, Matt Barzal has put up 0.81 points per game. Bo Horvat, 0.79. So they're pretty damn close.
Yeah.
Bo Horvat, 130 goals to Barzal's 81. But the big kicker for me is why I think Bo Horvat's going to be much more important to this team and maybe have a little bit more leverage is Barzal has only been drawn at 35.9% in the faceoff circle. Bo Horvat's going to come in and improve that drastically at 56%, and I don't think he's going to, drop that much more, if anything at all, when it comes to the faceoff dot. Because yes, you do get help from your wingers when it comes to winning draws, but I think Horvat is just much better at that. He plays, a much better two-way game than Barzal does, and so with the points per game being so close over the last few seasons, it's very, very easy, and scoring more goals, by the way, it's very easy for Horvat to make the argument that, hey, I want the same amount of dollars, if not more, than what you're paying Barzal. And, I don't know if Lou is that kind of guy to hand out that kind of money right now to a guy like that.
Well, you would have to think that coming into this, it's not like he's looking at him going, all right, we want him he doesn't want him just as a rental. Obviously they'll take him as a rental, but I don't think they made this move just to have him for this season. So when you consider that, you have to think, well, then what is Lou thinking that he would sign him for? And it's going to be somewhere in the reasonable range, right? So I think they're probably going to go down to him and say, here's my guess. I remember Vancouver gave Bo Horvat, here's our best offer, right?
7 times 8, I think is what it was. Yeah.
Okay. And therefore, he's not going to accept 7 times 8. It's going to need to be more. It's going to need to be 8 times 8, 8.5 times 8, whatever it may be. So are we willing to do that? Yes. Okay, well then let's trade for him and then we'll negotiate. We'll get him a better deal. And I think they're in position to do it. They also have a lot of aging players who could probably be moved with some ease. You're looking at like Josh Bailey, who's going to be 34 next year. You've got, Brock Nelson, who will have a couple years left. Kyle Palmieri have a couple years left. You've got some players who you could move if you needed the money. So I have no doubt that Lou can finagle with the salary cap to get someone that he wants and believes in signed. So that I mean I love the Horvat Barzal 1-2 punch at the center position, and then throwing Horvat on at center, and Barzal gets to be the dish man on the power play. And Horvat gets to be the guy that goes out there and scores some goals in the power play. This is what the Islanders desperately needed, was a goal scorer. Somebody who knows how to put the puck in the net. I mean, the Islanders have just struggled to score goals. They can play that defensive game, but man, they struggle to score. They have really no one on their team that you look up and down their roster and you go, who's going to walk down the ice and just toss a nice snapshot above the pad, short side, tough shot where like the score can change immediately. They don't really have that guy. They have the guys who are going to work and work and work and work and work and squeeze goals out of nothing kind of vibe. And Horvat, I think, provides that little spark that sometimes you just need. Like when it's 2-0, you're down and you just need that quick goal. He's the kind of guy that can provide that. So I like this move for the Islanders right now. We'll see how it all transpires, depending on what happens with the rest of their season, the lottery, and the development of Ratti, and what the Canucks get for Beauvillier. It'll be interesting to see what the market would be for him if he's dealt a loan. And who knows? Maybe Beauvillier is a guy who if he does decent and somebody says, hey, we'd like Beauvillier, we'll bring him in, and you eat half his contract or something like that for the next 2 years, and maybe they put him right back up and he moves again, depending on what level of quote unquote rebuild we do here in Vancouver.
Yeah, that's very true. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, and I'm just going to say it right now.
Thanks for finally not lying.
Yeah, I'm not going to be a liar on this show, just so the listeners are aware.
This time.
I don't think Bo Horvat will sign with this team before the summer. I think he's going to take a peek at free agency and see what's out there.
Okay. Anything that makes you feel that way, or just a hunch? Just the way that maybe he's approached this with the Canucks, or what?
Well, you know what? I think first off, I think Horvat's never, it's very rare that players, at this kind of age, at this kind of talent level, get to hit free agency. It doesn't happen too often. And I think, at this point in his career, he's going to want to look at options, right? I mean, the Islanders aren't exactly a Stanley Cup favorite, but they're not exactly a dumpster fire, bottom feeder team right now either, right? So, he might want to take a step back and, approach it with a little bit of caution and say, you know what, hey, I'm just going to take a peek. Because, listen, I know word came out last week that the Red Wings offered Dylan Larkin an 8x8, and he turned it down. I know he's looking for more Matt Barzal money, which, is understandable. And
who's not going to be, like, Matthew Barzal is I don't even know if given the choice between the two of them, I think I want Larkin.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, all day. And so, yeah, and I mean, I look at the other level of free agency talent coming out in free agency as far as the center position is concerned, and there's really nothing outside of Larkin and, maybe Ryan O'Reilly. There's not that much, as far as top-end talent is concerned. And so, I think Bo Horvat's going to have the pick of the litter. And, at this stage in his career, maybe he wants that extra year of security, signing, 8 years versus 7. But, again, if it comes down to money or if it just comes down to picking the right fit, which is more important to Horvat, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you have 3 players, all the captain of their team, all centers, all becoming UFAs in the same year. Like they would have. Right. I know Barzal already signed his deal, but the fact that you had all 3 of these guys, all 3 captains, all 3 centers coming into UFA and basically being very similar players. Not all of them they don't play exactly the same way. Barzal certainly more of a setup man. Bo Horvat kind of that two-way goal scoring type of center, and then you've got Dylan Larkin, who just is, I mean, he may be one of the ultimate Swiss Army knife type of players and the kind of guy that you just want to die for. I think that if the Wings were good and they were in the playoffs, like That's the kind of guy that you want to play with. He's got that mojo about him, something that I think that very few captains, especially of bad teams, tend to have. Like, guys want to go to the wall, like go through a wall for him, and I think that that's the unique thing about Larkin. But you look at that Barzal deal and you go, I mean, how are you giving either one of them less than what Barzal just got?
Yeah, I think the argument is going to be, what's better for the team, right? Because the Red Wings obviously still want to take another step, and they'll need to bring in, another piece or two, and to do that, you need cap space, right? And so if you want to convince these guys to take just a little, like if you could get Larkin for $8.75 or $9 million, just a little under where Barzal is, that little extra bit of money might help you in the short term.
But that's when I look at it, and all right, let's take a gander at the best teams in the league here, and let's see what they're doing. What did Colorado just give Nathan McKinnon? $12.6 million. They gave Rantanen $9.25 million. They gave Makar $9 million. The Lightning, like, what are they giving their players? They won Stanley Cups, and the Lightning are, I know guys take a little bit of a discount to stay there, but it's still 9.5, 9.5, 8.5, and that 8.5 deal was signed 6 years ago. So that 8.5 would definitely be higher now. Vasilevsky at 9.5. So I feel like these really good players, they're signing for at least 9 now. 9 is now what we saw at like $8 million a couple of years ago. With the cap going up, $9 million is going to be I'm a really good player. You're giving me at least 9. Like, this Barzal deal was the initial tip of, hey, times are about to change a little bit because the cap's going up again. We've gotten really used to seeing players sign for the same amount for a long time because the cap has really been steady or it's been exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And it's going to start going up, and so then that is going to take that baseline number and increase it. So I don't think you're getting Larkin for less than 9 because he's not necessarily concerned about next year. He's going, well, in 5 years, when the guys that are signing deals for $11 and $12 million, I'm going to be hilariously underpaid again. So. You're gonna have to pay him probably that $9.5 million deal.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And it's in my mind too. He has been a warrior for Detroit. He's done everything that he can to help this team, to move them along, to help guys develop. He's been a coach's guy. No matter what coach is in there, he's been a favorite of those coaches. They like him. He's improved his own game. Like everything that you could want out of a player, he's done. And now push comes to shove. You're paying no one more than $6.1 million. Is there another team in the NHL with a lower, as far as the highest paid player on the team, where they're only making $6.1 million?
You know what? I will say no.
And and the second most is 5.6, and the third most is 4.75. So I mean, you don't even have 2 players making over $6 million on this team.
Yeah, so. Maybe. Yep. Okay, I was going to say Seattle. Their highest paid player is Phil Grubauer at 5.9. But yeah. I mean, I will say this to your argument, and this almost convincing me as I say it out loud. But, for the Red Wings to pay Dylan Larkin that extra million, that extra $500,000 versus having to essentially lose him and start a whole rebuild again because now you don't have that number one center, is just not worth it. Just give him his money and
especially if Horvat is going to re-signs in New York. If you could get Horvat and right. You kind of switch them out, okay. I mean, still isn't ideal to me because you've brought Larkin up. Larkin's been there his whole life. His whole adult life, he's been a Red Wing.
Yeah, he's a Detroit born and raised kid too. So
yeah, exactly. Played at U of M. Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully that happens. That's the one that if it doesn't happen and he doesn't re-sign, I'm going to be kind of mad. And I don't even like the Red Wings. I'm just going to kind of be mad. Like that's why I think there's just no way that Yzerman lets him walk.
No.
And I understand. Hey, you got to you're going to put out this 8x8, and you're going to go sign this 8x8. Look at how good we're going to be. And this deal is going to take you till you're 34. So, I mean, it in some respects, you're going to go at 34. It's likely that you're not going to be producing at an $8 million pace. So we do want to be privy to that, but he's going to go, well, I don't care. Like, I need to get paid more. Also, I'm sure there's pressure from the NHLPA going, you can't take less than Barzal. Or at least you can't take $1 million less than Barzal. You know, if he comes in at 9x8, whatever, that extra 100,000 doesn't really do anything for me, but well, it would do something for me personally. I would like it, but as far as the numbers go. All right, well, shall we I guess, I mean, we've kind of done this organically, but we were planning on talking about how this Horvat deal, kind of what dominoes are going to put into place here. Which ones are going to start falling now that this deal has been made? Did you have any in mind when you I know you were the one that posed that idea to me. Was there any that you had in mind?
I mean, obviously, I think that, you're going to see, I'm hoping we'll see some bigger name pieces happen quicker, right? And by bigger name, I'm really looking at Patrick Kane and the Chicago Blackhawks, Jonathan Taves. I think now that, teams don't have to worry about paying for Bo Horvat, because I think he was the prize for a lot of teams that needed that centerman, that top six guy there. He's gone, and so now you're going to look at teams that maybe necessarily don't need a centerman. They're going to look for wingers. To me, I look at Patrick Kane being the next big prize, or Timo Meier perhaps, but I'm interested to see what happens, with the Blackhawks, really, because similar to Vancouver, I think they're going to be shuffling in and out a lot of pieces before the deadline. And with 5 weeks to go, especially with a Patrick Kane, I think, a lot of teams may try to wait closer to the deadline for a guy like Kane because of his cap hit, but it honestly wouldn't shock me, because I think teams want to try to get ahead of this sooner rather than later, especially with a lot more competitiveness in the standings. I think, getting ahead of that and getting your guy, quote unquote, now would be ideal. And so for example, the Islanders got their guy, right? They got Bo Horvat in there, and you think that's got to propel them in some aspects. So you look at Pittsburgh and Washington, and not too far off from that are the Rangers. One of those guys might be, again, those domino effects might trickle down to one of those teams to make a move for somebody right now, or their guy that they've been targeting.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we all know that Kane's name's been connected with the Rangers. But by the way, I just want to throw this out. Biggest all-star snub is the fact that the Blackhawks sent Seth Jones instead of Patrick Kane. This is going to be Patrick Kane's likely his last all-star game as a Chicago Blackhawk. Or the potential for that. Yeah. But obviously now he's not going, so he's already had his last game in the All-Star game as a Blackhawk. I feel like he kind of made the All-Star game cool again, to be honest. He did
with that Superman.
The Superman kid.
Like, my gosh!
Yeah, he did it. It was just him, and I just feel like it should have been. Hey, we're going to honor you one more time for all you've done for our organization. He's having a fine year. He's still at 34 points in 45 games or whatever. Like, it's not as if he's just complete garbage anymore or anything. I mean, so I get maybe they're thinking they just want to rest him. They don't want him to get hurt because they know they're going to deal him. I would have liked to see him in one more All-Star game as a Chicago Blackhawk, but not going to happen. Biggest All-Star snub for me.
Yeah, that would have been nice. And I will say, for those who might be curious, the rumor is that Bo Horvat is still going to the All-Star game and going to represent the Pacific Division. But the question is he going to put an Islanders patch on his jersey or a Vancouver patch, I wonder. But wouldn't it be funny, though, if playing in the 3-on-3 game, if he just turns around and scores on his own team on purpose?
What a weird
like a double agent.
That I know, he's right? Going to go. Yeah, I mean, I get it. The All-Star game's in like 3 days. I guess it's next. Yeah, it's Saturday, right? So yeah. Saturday, and today's Tuesday, I think.
All day.
All day. It's been Tuesday. Yes. as far as those other dominoes, I did want to mention Pittsburgh because their head coach Mike Sullivan came out and said, I need to do a better job coaching these players. You don't often hear a coach talk like that. Now, I would say that is probably somebody who's very confident in their job. Like Mike Sullivan we'll put him in that like top 5 coaches in the NHL kind of arena. And Sidney Crosby loves him. Malkin loves him. Like the guys who are important love him. So I don't think that he's going anywhere. So I think he can come out and say this and like be very honest. Like, hey, I need to change something. I need to do a better job coaching these guys. And I think that a lot of that is really him saying, I mean, I'm willing to deflect some of our players' bad playing and take it on myself. And I'm also willing to ignore the fact that our general manager has not made any moves for me, but I could do a better job here. Like, he's just kind of deflecting blame and taking it on himself, which is what a good head coach does. But I think this lends itself to an important puzzle piece, and that is like, what do the Pittsburgh Penguins do here at the deadline? And unfortunately, I think they need to get a goalie.
Do they, though?
I think they might need to go out and snag someone who can play, because they have just had health issues left and right at the goaltending position. Can you imagine if, again, Pittsburgh has to go to their third-string goalie in the playoffs?
Dustin Tokarski?
I think they have to go out and they have to grab a good backup goalie to back up the backup. And that's got to be their first thing that they do. But then from there, I mean, when you look at this roster and you go, well, they re-signed Rickard Rakell. In some respects, that was their deadline acquisition, and now he's there. And because of that, I don't think that they have the space to really go out and grab someone that can score goals, unless you're willing to ditch Teddy Bluger or Denton Heinen. You're probably going to have to jettison someone to be able to do that. So I'm just wondering, like, what can Pittsburgh actually do? Because they seem to kind of be jammed up against it, even with Malkin and Letang taking less money than they were making last year.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? That money that they sort of left on the table, right? You had Rickard Rakell kind of take some of that, and they brought in some other defensemen that I think kind of ate up a little bit of that too. And so, you know what? I agree with you. I think, they do have to go find a backup because, Casey DeSmith for me hasn't been good enough when he has been in there. He started the season pretty decent, if I remember correctly, and just, hasn't been looking that good as of late. But I think as a whole, the team hasn't either. And you're right, Tristan Jarry just hasn't stayed healthy enough for me to make me feel confident that, he's going to be available during the playoffs. It's kind of like Carolina with Freddie Anderson and Antti Raanta. Don't get me wrong, I like both those goaltenders, but I'm still concerned that they, won't stay healthy. And luckily for Carolina, they have a fantastic third stringer there. Right. So they really don't have to worry as far as goaltending is concerned, like Pittsburgh does. And so, yeah, you're right. Dustin Tokarski is not the answer, right? He's no Louis Domingue. So you're going to have to, I think, find another reliable option. And the only problem is, like you mentioned, the cap space for them. They're still pressed up against it. And unless you want to jettison Jason Zucker's contract, which maybe they might do, maybe not, but he's having a quietly productive year. So, do you really think you're better off losing that production and bringing in a backup goaltender, right, to be able to afford somebody at a higher salary rate? But I will say there are a lot of options, though, and when I say options, I mean just cheaper options, right, guys that have decent play and they could come in at lower cost. Like, for example, I think Craig Anderson at $1.5 million could be an option for them. You could also go out and maybe look at a guy like Phoenix Copley in Los Angeles, although I doubt they're going to want to get rid of him if they make a push for the playoffs. Cam Talbot might be somebody, but again, he's a little bit too pricey, even at $3.66 million.
Right, that's the tough part. They like to have a third string goalie who's going to make a lot of money is just that's a hard sell.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you could go out and get, like I said, there's other guys like Alex Stalock, you could go get him from Chicago at 35 years old. Is he a better option? Maybe, maybe not. You could go out to Vancouver and get Chris D'Elia. Maybe Thomas Greiss out of St. Louis if they, fall too far out of the playoffs. And, maybe Detroit, maybe you go look at, Magnus Hellberg or, even Nedeljkovic, maybe if Detroit's willing to retain some salary. So
certainly there's some other teams' backup goalies that they, that are free agents or 1 year left on the deal. Yeah, that you could move. I think for Pittsburgh, they're probably looking at it going, if we can just keep Jari healthy, then we'll be okay.
And that's the thing, though, because you're going to see the Islanders, I think, creep up in the standings a little bit. If you're Pittsburgh, you don't want to just go get any third string, any backup goaltender. You want to get somebody that you can actually play, who's reliable and going to give you good numbers, because you have to assume down the stretch, right? At a very minimum, he's going to sit out at least, I would think, 50% of the games. At least playing every other game, because you want Jari healthy and ready to go. And so I don't really trust Casey DeSmith to take on half the workload, in my opinion. So maybe you hold on to 3 goaltenders on the roster and rotate a guy in,
right?
And give him a little bit of relief. And so you can't bring in somebody who's going to have a question mark in net, right? You want a guy who you can bring in and be like, okay, you know what? I think we're going to be confident that he's going to give us a W.
Yeah, I do think that this, now that Horvat's been dealt. And by the way, Kuzmenko signed to a 2-year deal. That's big news for Vancouver that they're able to. He wanted to come there. Obviously, we talked about that on our last show, that he chose Vancouver. He came to Vancouver, so it was likely that he was going to resign, and he does. I think maybe the most valuable piece, I think maybe even more valuable than Patrick Kane at the deadline, is Vladislav Gavrikov of the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think he's probably the best defenseman that's going to get moved at the deadline. And, he's going to fit into almost any team's top 4 and is going to change. That's a guy who's going to play 22 minutes a night. And I think he'll have the biggest impact on whatever team he goes to. He plays the playoff style hockey that you need. And I think whoever gets him is going to have a huge leg up. I know that Toronto's been in on him. I know that they're interested in him. And they'd have to be with losing Jake Muzzin. That's been a hole that they almost haven't needed to fill because they've played so well defensively without Muzzin. And even when there was no Brody and no Riley, they had some good games, and Giordano kind of elevated himself. But you certainly could use that extra defenseman. And as far as other teams that are contending, you mentioned the Islanders needing a defenseman. If you're going to truly make a run for the playoffs here, he's probably the guy who could make maybe even a bigger difference than Bo Horvat because of his ability to defend and force the puck the other way. Or maybe I should say, in conjunction with Bo Horvat, he would be a great addition because you get that guy who can score goals and also add in someone who can really shore up your defense.
Yeah, I will say, as a goaltender, you have a different mindset, right, going into a game if you know you have that defensive rock back there, right? You don't have to constantly worry about, oh, crap, I know my guys are going to give up a bunch of odd man rushes this game. I know they're going to turn over the puck. If you have that guy back on the blue line, I'll be honest with you, when we played hockey, when you were back on defense, I knew, okay, he's going to cover my ass. He's going to back check. He's going to make sure that
I'm actually going to skate back. Yeah.
Right. He's going to make sure that guys have to go through a physical wall, which is Mark Paul, to get to the net. Right. So I'm not as worried as I might have been, say, if, some of the other defenders we had on the team were back there some nights, and, I could play with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more swagger. And as a goaltender, you want that. And so I think for a lot of teams that struggle defensively, they're going to look to add a piece like that. And he's going to, I think he's going to be a higher price as far as, deadline acquisitions are concerned. And I think there's going to be a lot of teams, that are going to be inquiring about it.
I think you're giving up a first-round pick for him. I really do. I think whoever ends up with him, I think is going to go, well, we're going to have to give up a first-round pick if we want him. It may be a first in 2024, but it is going to be a first-round pick.
I'm kind of curious. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me pull this up. What Denny Savard got sorry, not Denny Savard, David Savard.
David Savard. He got was it a first and a third?
Oh boy, yeah.
First
because I think what he got is probably going to be similar to I think the the deal
and you're dealing with the same team too. So
yeah, what did he get? Yeah, first and third. You're right. Yep. The Blue Jackets got a first and a third from Tampa, and Tampa also had to give the Red Wings a fourth-round pick to keep some salary. So, so I agree. I think
his salary's at least reasonable enough to where there's a chance that you might not
every
need
team could
that extra team to help out.
$2 million. Yeah, absolutely not. I think any team. Yeah, teams could easily fit him in. And if not, they just send they send a roster player back the other way to cut $1 million off. And boom, there you go, right? Then you can squeeze them in. So there's going to be no shortage of teams that I think are going to be inquiring about him. And yeah, you're probably right. Looking at the Savard deal, even I know it's been a few years since then, but I do think you're probably right. It's probably going to take a first round pick to get him. And
who did who did Florida trade for last year?
Claude Giroux.
No, they traded for a defenseman too, didn't they?
You're talking Ben Sherratt.
Ben Sherratt, yes.
Yeah.
What did Ben Sherratt get? Or what did they give up for Ben Sherratt? That would be the other. Let's see. They gave up a fourth and a first.
Okay. Yeah.
The first was top 10
and a prospect.
And a prospect. Yeah. Okay. So we'll say like a first and a third essentially is what they gave up. So and that's Ben Sherratt. I think that Gavrikov's a better player.
Yeah, you might be right. But if anything, right, they were both, as sought after at the deadline for their defensive capabilities. Now it didn't clearly work out, and I don't think either one of these deals worked out for either team during their respective runs. And I think maybe that might cause a little hesitation. But I think you're right; it's going to cost at least a first. At this point,
Tampa Bay win the Stanley Cup?
Yeah, they did, but he did jack squat for them, if I'm being honest.
I don't think you care.
Yeah, at that point, you really don't care.
Cup, so you're good. But yes, this trade deadline is going to be a little different because I think that teams are starting to be willing to deal with some term because they know that the cap is going to go up. Although maybe this whole Bally Sports thing throws a loop into that whole conversation. We haven't really talked about it much. I don't know how much you've read and heard about the Bally Sports bankruptcy, but that there's a possibility that some payments might be missed for the rights deal. And if that happens, that's hundreds of millions of dollars. So if that happens, then, does that affect the cap from going up? I don't think we're there yet, but I think that it is a conversation. And you know what? NHL owners like the least uncertainty. So I think there is a chance that, after all this, like, hey, we'll start taking on term again because the cap's going up. Maybe there's more hesitancy now because of this. So we'll see about that. But I think in general, teams have to be thinking the cap's going to start moving. So it's okay if we take a player like Vancouver did. It's okay if we take a player who has some term left on his deal. We're not panicking about that.
No, I think you're right. And, if it's for the right player, right? Obviously, if it's a player that I think a team would be okay with keeping long-term anyways, not necessarily a guy that, they maybe are hoping to just get a year out of and then they're going to jettison anyways. That might be a little different, but it'll be interesting to see what big name goes next. And, obviously we're probably not going to hear anything over the next few days with the All-Star break, but, I do think we're going to probably see some dominoes fall here pretty soon. I would suspect, again, like I said, I think that teams just want to get ahead of it because we're so tight in the standings right now. I think teams like, Anaheim, San Jose, Chicago, Arizona, they're going to want to start jettison pieces and start tanking for Connor Bedard and, a top 3 pick, I think. Well, I should say try to separate themselves from those other pieces at the bottom because, gosh, if right now, you look at it between all the teams at the bottom of their division, really, they're all within, outside of Montreal, at the bottom of the the Atlantic, all of them are sitting pretty dang close within that 33 to 37 point range. So if you got a lot of teams, at that range,
Did you expect Columbus to be the worst team in the NHL this year?
Gosh, no, not at all. I mean, I knew they had issues at the center position, which was why I was surprised Gaudreau went there to begin with. But, I figured at least with him coming there, they'd have a little boost in offense. But they can't seem to score. I mean, literally outside of Chicago, they are the worst, and Anaheim, they're the worst scoring team in the NHL, which is just horrendous for a team that, last year, I mean, don't get me wrong, they weren't scoring leaps and bounds, but, they were still producing. They managed to finish last year with 262 goals, which was, better than all the other teams, below them in the division and in the conference.
Yeah, it's really funny. Consider this. That Johnny Gaudreau leaves for Columbus, and Columbus goes from, Columbus last year was still towards the bottom of the standings, but they were respectful. And they go down. Last place in the league right now. The Calgary Flames, who then went and dealt Matthew Tkachuk to the Florida Panthers for Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. Well, the Florida Panthers are out of the playoffs right now and probably not going to make the playoffs the way that they're playing. So that means that Matthew Tkachuk now misses the playoffs. And then, you know what? For their troubles, the Calgary Flames, even though they made all those great moves that everybody said they had the best offseason out of any team and made something out of nothing, they're sitting outside the playoffs right now too and might not make it in. So it seems as though all three of those teams that have that tie together for this season, none of them have improved. That is for sure. All of them got worse by swapping pieces, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I will say the only player out of all of those moves that's really, in my opinion, maybe looked a little bit better, even though his team as a whole isn't better, has been Matthew Tkachuk.
Matthew Tkachuk, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, he's been fantastic.
Right, yeah, absolutely. But, that goes to show you what, chemistry, spending, all these other players that spent, years on their respective teams. So, and systems that are in place there already. It goes to show you, you put a guy in a new setting. Sometimes it takes a little time to get things going, and especially for Calgary, who essentially lost an entire top line, and Florida,
right.
loses their, a core piece.
Here's what sucks. I'll tell you what's. You know who I feel the worst for is Jonathan Huberdeau, because he wanted to stay in Florida, right? Like he was just dealt. He didn't have a choice.
Right.
He had so he's dealt. But then some might say, well, you didn't have to sign. Like, it's clear that him and Daryl Sutter maybe don't see eye to eye on the way that hockey should be played or is played, or the way that he plays. Daryl Sutter doesn't necessarily give Huberdeau every opportunity to score. Which, hey, who knows? Maybe a couple years under Sutter and suddenly he's a world beater. But at least for this year, it looks like there's a little tension there. We'll just say tension. Now, what do you do when the Flames come to you and say, we'll give you $10.5 million for 8 years? That's over $80 million, $84 million. We're going to give you $84 million over the next year, 8 years. Now, you could go to your agent and you could say, here's my dilemma. I don't know if I want to play here. I have no idea. And he goes, well, Sutter will be gone eventually. Sutter's not going to be there 8 years. That's fair. That's a good point. But you don't know what kind of year you're going to have this year. So if Huberdeau hadn't signed that extension with Calgary, yeah, sure, he could have gone elsewhere, right? Like he'd be a UFA at the end of this year. Maybe we're talking about him getting dealt at the deadline, but he could have gone somewhere else and signed a deal. But you know what? Teams would be going, are we going to get the 33 points in 47 games, or are we getting the 115 points in 80 game guy? We'll give you $9 million. Like, he definitely would have lost money had he not signed that deal.
Yeah, so, and he loses that extra year, too.
And he loses the extra year, exactly. So he ends up, it's hard to feel bad. Like, hey, you would have only made $70 million instead of $84. But That is a factor. Like, I mean, I wouldn't want to lose $14 million.
No, and as an agent too, you have to think, right? Him getting his 10%,
Yeah, you're getting
that 1.4. He's sitting there thinking like, yeah, I'm not letting this guy walk away from this deal either. So you got that other voice in your ear just telling you, no, sign the deal.
Which,
and then
I don't think he would have gotten $10.5 million had he signed it at the end of this year.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with you. Right. Unless he had gone to a team, got traded at the deadline and just, went through the roof as far as production is concerned. And, like he was last year. And then you could say, okay, well, clearly it was Sutter. It was the system in Calgary that just wasn't working for him. If we, put in place the tools he had in Florida or wherever he goes and, we'll get the production out of him. But now on the flip side, you have to think, if Calgary's paying him $10.5 million and he's just not producing, especially after signing Kadri, giving Huru all that money, and you think it's just not working, we're getting worse. How long does Suter have a job left? Because eventually, with a guy like, maybe Barry Trotz sitting out there and, again, other coaches, who knows? Maybe they might want to make a change this offseason because you want to cash it on your investment as soon as possible because once he gets to, that 33, 34 years old, it's he might not be worth that $10.5 million anymore.
It's true. It puts Calgary in an interesting position. I mean, they have about $4 million in deadline space. You would think, especially with like Lucic's contract ending at the end of the year. I mean, they've got some space to be able to add here. Not a whole lot of space next year, but could add here at the deadline. The issue that I have is I'm looking ahead here and I'm going, well, who are you going to jump? Are you going to beat out the Avalanche or are you going to beat out the Oilers for that final playoff spot? Like, that's kind of what it looks like right now. And maybe the Avs kind of come alive here and they catch Minnesota. Let's say it's Minnesota that you're chasing instead. I mean, it is not going to be an easy road for Calgary to get into the playoffs. You look at Colorado 7-3 in their last 10. Edmonton 7-1-2. I guess it's Minnesota is the team you're looking to hunt down because they may fall. You've got to expect Colorado probably in these last 30 games is going to show you why they are these defending Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah, I agree. And listen, let's not count out Nashville either. I think the one big thing, yes, they made the big move in the offseason, but historically, David Poile has not been a guy, in my opinion, that likes to make the big deadline deal, right? I mean, he doesn't make a ton of those big name moves. And typically most of his bigger deals are done in the offseason. You look at it when, Victor Arvidsson and Ryan Ellis and all these other moves, Ryan McDonough, they're all done in the offseason. And so with $10 million to spend at deadline space, I think, honestly, this is a year where I think Nashville could make a move to bring in a big piece, whether it's, maybe a Vladimir Tarasenko or, who have you.
He's somebody that him and Ryan O'Reilly, both players that certainly could move. I had this inkling. The whole organization is completely different now. Would Ryan O'Reilly go back to Colorado? Because for every other reason other than the fact that he had a kind of garbage ending to his tenure in Colorado. What a great fit that would be if he's 100% and playing like the Ryan O'Reilly that we know. How great of an addition would Ryan O'Reilly be to the Avalanche team right now?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it would be a great addition, but I guess the question is, at what point is St. Louis finally going to admit that they're really not in it? I mean, yes, they're 8 points out, at this point, but. Yeah, but they've lost 5 in a row. I don't think like you said, that's just too many. Their goal differential.
8 points might as well be 50 because you don't come back at this point.
Yeah, it's like you said with Calgary there fighting for a spot. You've got Colorado, Edmonton. In my opinion, Nashville is going to make a nice little push here too. Obviously, I think St. Louis is like Vancouver. I think they're done at this point. You can stick a fork in them, and so. But it's just whether or not they want to be delusional and hang on to Ryan O'Reilly and Tarasenko for too long, and then. Maybe they don't deal them. So.
If you're St. Louis right now, you're kind of at the bottom of the pack in this next tier of bad teams. You're not in the bottom, right? Like Montreal is 5 points back of them. Vancouver 6 points. San Jose 8 points. So right now, where St. Louis sits, they're 8th last in the NHL. If they have any better of a season, they're going to jump Ottawa, Detroit, maybe Philadelphia, and then you're kind of into that like no man's land where you can no longer get the top pick with the lottery, but you know it's just there's no point in going down that road at this point. You have your first round pick, and that first round pick, you have a chance to draw a little token out of a barrel and get Connor Bedard. That is where you should be pushing to. Just do what you need to do to give yourself that chance. And if you don't get Bedard, there's some other very nice options at 2 and 3 in this draft that will change your organization's futures and probably make it so that you can be competitive again next year. You can re-sign Ryan O'Reilly if you want to. You can. I don't know what the rules are for telling a guy like, hey, we really like you. If you were a free agent again, we would sign you, but we're going to trade you today. Like, I don't know what those kind of rules are, but certainly you can trade a guy and then re-sign him in the offseason. So, yeah, I'd be trying to get what I can for Ryan O'Reilly and get what I can for Tarasenko, because I think Tarasenko is definitely gone after this year. So you're doing what you can to offload him. He's a goal scorer and probably the best one out of this mix of players that you're going to get at the deadline. So he's going to be valuable. He's going to fetch you something pretty big. So I think that the Blues should be not tearing it all down, because you're not getting rid of Shen or Kyrou, Thomas. You've got nice pieces. You just need a little bit of a reset. And I think that by getting rid of O'Reilly and Tarasenko, you change your locker room and you kind of give yourself that full refresh that you almost tried to do this year and last by, we'll let Thomas and Kyrou come on the team. And you kind of say, all right, boys, this is your team now. So I think that's what they need, and I think that they could still be competitive in the Western Conference and be a playoff team and kind of rebuild on the fly, because they really do have some nice young players.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they really could. Obviously, I think they need to maybe find a backup to play with Binnington.
No, they just need to find a whole new goalie.
Well, yeah, you're not going to get rid of him. Maybe you buy him out. I don't know.
Honestly, not opposed.
Yeah, I mean, with the cap space going up, maybe you can look at that and say, you know what, we can afford now to buy him out, right? We can take that extra that cap hit. And so,
I think you're at least willing to say, well, okay, we're actually pretty bad anyways. So how much of a difference is he making to us being bad, and are we just bad? I'd be willing to go, well, we're going to bring him back another year, because remember, when you buy out a guy, I mean, that's like double the amount of years that his contract counts against you. And
well, here's the thing, Binnington, right? If they buy him out this offseason, because the first date you can buy a guy out is June 15th. So if they buy him out next year, they have a $666,000 cap hit for this year, next year. Then the third year, 1.6. Year after that, 3.6, 2.1 for the next 4 years after. So those are reasonable cap hits with the cap going up that you can afford without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you can extend that an extra year and get rid of one of those years on the books, so then you're only buying out 3 years of $6 million. I think that's maybe a little more palatable, especially if you're depending on how good you think you're going to be, and if it matters that you have Jordan Binnington on your books. I guess that would be the other question. We'll do a St. Louis deep dive at some point, I'm sure, in the offseason. God, we're already talking about the offseason for the Blues. Sorry, Blues fans. We're crazy. For some reason it feels like we're almost at the playoffs, but we've got a ways to go here. Out of any team that's not in the playoffs, which one do you think is going to make the playoffs?
Not in the playoffs. It's going to make the playoffs. If I had to pick a team, I would probably say, man, that's a very, very good question.
I'm going to say Buffalo Sabres.
I'm going to say Buffalo. Yeah. Granted, Tage Thompson Thompson is hurt right now, a little out, but it's only supposed to be day to day. So assuming he comes back and maybe they decide, you know what, we're going to reward this team. They played so good this season. We're going to, go out and make a little acquisition. Maybe they make a little noise, bring in somebody who can play in that middle six or somebody on that back end for them. You know what? I think this team could be, a little dangerous. I mean, they're sitting there 1 point behind Pittsburgh, and if Pittsburgh or Washington, tend to drop out, I mean, they've, both of those teams have only won 4 in their last 10. So if they can't piece it together here down the stretch, Buffalo could easily hop one of them.
Which team is most likely to miss the playoffs that's sitting in a playoff spot right now?
Oh, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to say the Edmonton Oilers, to be quite honest.
Edmonton Oilers. Okay, that is at 7-1-2 in their last 10. They're coming alive with Evander Kane back too.
They are. I will say, but for me, if you're not getting good goaltending, which don't get me wrong, Stuart Skinner's played pretty good this year, but Campbell's obviously the guy, and if he can't get it together, I don't know yet enough about Skinner. There hasn't been enough of a sample size there for me to trust him down the stretch here going into the playoffs when games get a little tighter. And they need another piece on that back end. If they can go address that, maybe bring in a reliable third stringer, go and bring in a top 4 guy on the back end, maybe then at that point, I can say, okay, you know what, I think this team's going to be okay. Because listen, Connor McDavid is just running away with every. I mean, no one's even close as far as production is concerned. And Leon Draisaitl is still there, and so like you said, with Evander Kane back, they've got the offensive ability to do that. If they can just shut down the goals a little bit more, then I would feel comfortable. But
are you making a case why they will make the playoffs right now?
Well, I mean, I'm making the case on why they need to go make some moves to stay in the playoffs.
So I'll just say this: I think that Brendan Shanahan should re-sign Kyle Dubas today to a new deal as the general manager of the Leafs because he didn't sign Jack Campbell. I mean, he just saved the Leafs so much grief by doing that. It was, that's just, I mean, it's just one of those, like, usually you don't get a lot of people saying, hey, you know what was a really good move? When you didn't give that guy a huge contract. and this is one of those cases where it sure looks like that was the right move. I'm going to say that the team most likely to miss the playoffs that is in the playoffs right now, I'm looking at I'm having a hard time.
I know you're looking east.
I'm between Washington and Minnesota. Those are the two teams that I'm kind of between. I think that Minnesota will drop into the wild card spots here. I'm worried because if they do deal Matt Dumba, I'm worried what that defense looks like, and I don't know that they have the staying power. Calgary could very easily make this not even a contest. And then you mentioned Nashville. Like, Nashville's moving. I think that Minnesota just might not have the horses, and that would be
for me. I think the problem with Minnesota is they just don't score enough up front.
Right. That's what I'm saying. They don't have the horses to do it.
Even if you get rid of Matt Dumba, maybe you go out and you bring in a scorer, right? Maybe you can go out and get a Tarasenko or somebody, a big name player, because you move out Dumba's contract, right? Going the other way. Maybe that works out. But yeah, because they don't have an ideal number 1 center, which I thought Bo Horvat would have fit in really nice there. A guy who could score goals that this team desperately needs, and a number 1. So I don't know. You might be onto something with Minnesota here.
Yeah. Well, I guess only time will tell. We're about to hit this the All-Star break and kind of get that reset. It is a nice little reset to the season, and then it's kind of like, okay, this is go time. This tends to be when the games start to get a little more intense. Leading up to that trade deadline, that's another mark on the schedule there. But post All-Star game tends to be when games tighten up a little bit. Defense is just a little more focused. And you've got these teams going, shoot, we only have 30 games left. We need to win 20 of them at least to make the playoffs. Like, you've got some teams that are squeezing their sticks down the stretch. So it's always fun after the All-Star game. Kind of starts to shift a little closer to playoff hockey as we go along. So Will you watch the All-Star game? There's a question for you. That's our last question of the show.
Well, I'm going to probably say no. Not because I don't want to, but just because I've got a tight window to get my house finished up. And I'm not very excited about the dunk tank or some of those other things going on. I will say the best part about the All-Star game to me is the jerseys. But
the throwbacks?
Yeah, the little throwbacks there. I am enjoying those. But, yeah, there's just – I mean, because guys like – you're not going to see Austin Matthews. You're not going to see some of our better players in the All-Star game. There's a lot of names that have already been dropping out. I just, I'm not too excited about it. And I'm good. I don't know.
I'm good. Won't waste my time. I take it as okay, I can, I'm going to go do something else.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I've got something a little bit more important.
I might throw on the skills competition just because Esme might think it's funny. That's my daughter. She might think it's funny. She's like 2.5. So she might be into it a little bit. So I'm going to try, but that would be the only reason, which it's funny. You won't watch it because you're like, this dunk tank thing is stupid. I might watch it because it's so stupid. My 2-year-old might like it.
That's the way to do it.
So yes. And this is the kind of conversation that gets Gary Bettman on your show. So that's why we're having it. Come on, Gary. We met one time in New York City. I ran into him on walking out of Grand Central Station, and I said, "Mr. Commissioner?"
Mr. Commissioner.
That's what I called him.
I love it.
It's like, "Mr. Commissioner?" And he turned around and he said, "Hi." I said, "Can I get a picture with you?" He said, "Yeah, sure." All right, cool. Took a little selfie with Gary back in, that would have been like 2013, probably 2012, something like that.
Okay.
It was a while back.
I love it.
Yep, same. Well, all right, that is our show. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, any final words?
Pizza. I want pizza right now. Yes, those are my final words.
Actually, I'm going to have orange chicken from Trader Joe's.
Ooh.
If you've never had it before, my God. I've been craving it all day, and that's what I'm going to eat. So I'm going to enjoy my orange chicken. You enjoy your pizza. To our listeners, enjoy whatever it is that you're going to eat, except for the vegetables that are on your plate. Just throw this away, and we will talk to you guys soon.